Chase, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's the Divine Brothers meeting. Once again, one of us in Alabama, one of us in China, one of us in Thailand, I think. But whatever the case, we're all here, ready to talk about life, talk about everything, man. I had a good week. I was reading, reading like I'm supposed to do. And by reading, I mean I opened two books in two separate occasions and read two chapters out of each book. It was progress, all right? And I feel good about that. One of them, a spiritual book about the history of ancient Rome and religion, and the other one all about Joseph Goebbels and the Third Reich. And you know what? I feel very scholarly. So that's what I did with my week, huh? What did you two do? What did you two worthless individuals do with your limited life this week that showed that you have some value in this universe? Chase, Austin, anything to share?
Let's let
Uh,
Chase answer first. Is he
okay.
is he there? Yeah, he's there.
No, man, just been bouncing around. I didn't read the damn thing this week. Yeah.
Typical. Typical.
Yeah, that doesn't
Austin,
surprise me one bit, Chase.
yeah, me either. Go ahead,
I've been
Austin.
reading
Tell us what you
a
did.
book about shelling. It's deep and philosophical, and the
Shelling?
ideas are very important. Yeah, as far as like German, I transcendental idealism goes Kant, Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, and Schelling's good.
I've never even heard that name before. A philosopher?
Yes, German idealism.
Okay, interesting. Oh, idealism. Like how close to ideal? Like, are we talking about the ideal race, or no, totally different thing.
Yeah, idealism generally is the idea that mind is primary and matter is secondary.
Okay,
Transcendental idealism, from my understanding, is more like there is a world outside of you, but you don't have access to it. What you do have access is to a phenomenal realm that is, you know, formed by these things called categories, which are like filters. So there's a thing in itself. There's a real world, quote unquote, real world, and then you have a phenomenal world, and that's all you have access to. And this kind of general framework, I believe, that's a good way to describe it, is called transcendental idealism, and that's started by our friend Immanuel Kant.
oh man, these Germans they go too hard, man. They always go too hard. These German people, you know.
What
I
do you
think I
think?
prefer my simplicity.
What do you think the German progression was? Because I think of them in the Roman days of the tribes, right? Barbaric tribes that were difficult to quell, but they could never unite as one. So they're always causing problems, but they were always conquered. And then they come to these unbelievable heights of intellectualism and almost take over the world with their ideologies, man. It's been an interesting progression with those people.
The thing that I can tell you is that there's inherent militarism that's always existed in these folks. Yeah. And whether that's Germanic, tribal, like, trial by combat, like the Scandinavian identity of like proto Vikings mixing with Magyars and all that sort of stuff. But what happens later on is we have the Holy Roman Empire, right? Which adds sort of a combination of militarism with this zealotry, this religiosity, and it kind of fuses together where the state becomes almost a religion. Prussia comes out of that, and Frederick the Great makes this basically state religion of the military. And that eventually leads
Oh,
to World War I and World War II, where Germany can't really shake off this military religious legacy. And that's something I think you can trace back quite a long ways, man. And there's some like Scott, like there's this guy AJP Taylor who's like the OG World War II historian, like British guy, and he makes the argument that Germany, German culture, is in itself warlike. Same thing with Japan. The samurai culture is essentially warlike, and because of that, world war was an inevitability for both of them. Yeah. He's discounted this data like, it's a racist argument, but his points are interesting. He goes back a long way and makes some interesting conclusions about grand history. So yeah, it may be, maybe.
Well, I don't know much about the German. Definitely the samurai for sure. It's idealized, you know? It's just like, oh, this was our peak history, which could be true. The Germans, listen to when you hear them speak, you're like, oh my God, like, you know, I should do what they're saying. They sound upset.
It
I
is interesting, man. Like the Mongols are the same way, man. And it had like thousands of years of raiding China until somebody finally united them, and then they conquer the whole fucking world.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it,
Hey,
it
hey,
could.
so I've never thought of this because you're talking about military turned into like zealotry. It's like religion. Like, what was the Germans like when they were? I think of all the movies with the Romans having to go quell the German fucking hordes. You know, they're just tribes causing problems. What was the religious side back then before they were conquered and
Oh, Celts, man. They were like the Druids,
oh.
like the crazy, like, man, there's some fascinating. So now Celtic culture is a little different than Germanic culture. Like that's more Western Europe, but
I thought that was
oh
the
man.
UK and Ireland and shit like that, or am I
Sure,
wrong?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all kind of connected. Like they're all connected. So basically, the more west you go, the more Celtic it is, and the more west you go, the more Germanic slash Slavic it gets,
You mean East?
Yeah, sorry, east, yeah. But the idea is that you have these people who are very connected to nature, like almost an animist sort of religion where they really begin to, become deeply associated with these natural phenomenons. And because they're always observing nature, there's this real idea of survival of the fittest, right?
Sure.
Hence the combat culture, right? Like that's the whole idea of challenge, like a trial by combat, right? Like, okay, you've accused me of a crime. I have the right to fight for myself because if I prove I'm the strongest creature in nature, then clearly justice is on my side, just as it is in nature.
Law of the
You
jungle, man. Yeah.
Law of the jungle, yeah. It's a cool
That's
time.
the
It's a shame that it all died away. It's a really interesting culture. Go ahead, Austin.
yeah, that was like the Nietzschean Ubermensch, like
Yep.
might, the might of the right or the right of the mighty idea.
Yeah. An interesting thing about like J.R.R. Tolkien, like the whole Lord of the Rings world, the whole premise of his fantasy is he wanted to imagine a Britain that was never conquered by Rome. He wanted to imagine a world that is free of the Latin influence, where there was this purely Celtic or purely English culture that rose out of without Roman influence or Norman influence of any kind. So yeah, it's an interesting idea, man. And Austin, getting back to what you're talking about, this is not exactly transcendentalism, but that idea of like mixing the real world with the world you can't see. This book I read, this ancient city book, this guy went into 3 fucking chapters about fire and the sacred fire that everybody kept in their house. And it's fascinating because this idea of honoring the dead by keeping a fire alive in your house, it's not just a Roman idea, it's a Greek idea and a Hindu idea and a Chinese idea. There was always people wanted to communicate with the dead. They always felt like the dead were watching over them and that they had to somehow feed them, offer them sacrifices, pour wine into the earth, and they always there was no idea of a celestial God. There was no idea of going up to heaven. They always assumed they went down into the earth and they were hanging out in your house and you had to always interact with them every day. You started the day, pray to them, keep the fire lit. You end the day, pray to them, keep the fire lit. You know, and it's fascinating to me that that's an idea that's in all cultures everywhere. We got to do something to honor these dead. And now today we don't honor the dead at all. But I found that really interesting, man.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary about death regarding African cultures, and everybody was really afraid of dead people because there's this notion that people are mad when they experience misfortune, and death is looked at as the primary misfortune. So you have to, so in certain cases in this particular tribe, I forget the name, they change their names and they dress differently for a period of time until the ghosts go away because they fear that their family members will come back and attack them.
Oh, interesting. See, they had the same fear too in Rome, man. If you didn't honor your ancestors, they'd fuck you up. Like they would come around and they would make your life totally miserable. But if you did honor them, it was always believed that the dead were in a better, happier place.
But
You know?
now this is still a lot. I don't want to speak for China, but Bhutan, Thailand too. Most families have a small room dedicated to at least recent ancestors with the shrine, pictures, candles are lit, even food offerings and drinks almost daily, if not daily. So the animism's still alive here to a degree in certain places.
Thailand has that weird feel. You're in Thailand right now, right?
Yeah,
It's one of those places that just feels like another planet. You know, like yeah, you got all the touristy shit, but when you start interacting with Thai people, you get the Thai smile, of course, and everyone's smiling all the time, which
20
creeps.
something degrees at the Thai smile. My favorite is I owe you money, but you're never going to get it smile.
Yes, that's the classic one, man. Austin, that's from a book that
It's a
Chase
book.
found.
It's a
Yeah, that's from a
that's I
book.
was writing my
Yeah,
dissertation that was in the PhD library. I was like, wow, this is okay. Wow, this is documented. Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But the things like the little Chase, what do you call those little temples that are
S-
outside people's
Is
homes?
Spirit House. Yeah,
A little spirit house where you keep they have the same thing in Japan, little kami houses and stuff.
sure.
But you go around, you hear Buddhist chanting, and they and all that. It's a different world, man.
Spirits are very. So you brought up an interesting point earlier about you said the Celts. Is this what you called them? The ones that are
Celts.
Celts, and this is nature
Mm.
based, right? The
Yeah.
strong, which is to me, I first thing I think of nature based kind of spirituality is Native Americans, right? So we're saying that the core beginnings of the UK, which we think of as people that colonized the world, which actually that wasn't that wasn't there. That was more the Roman Empire that had the influence with democracy and all that. You're saying that the original peoples from those islands had the same kind of premise as the Native Americans, as far as everything kind of came through nature, as far as the
Well,
spiritual
you
side.
have to understand that we're talking about like literally thousands of years of
Sure.
genocide,
Oh,
right? So like the Celts are there, but they're basically genocide by the Romans or enslaved by the Romans. And then we get the Anglo-Saxons, which are Germanic people, and they basically take over the island. And then we get the Normans, the French, and they take over the island. So it's very difficult. And this is one of the criticisms that AJP Taylor talks about, right? Like when you're talking about, oh, the legacy of these people from 10,000 years ago, the fact is that a lot of those fucking people, they were wiped out and completely replaced by another people. Genocide is just a reality of human history.
so is this the case too, that everybody that's kind of got a nature-based approach tends to get conquered or wiped out?
I guess so. I don't really have a scholarly answer for you, but what I can tell you is when I think of people being wiped out, like Native Americans,
Yes.
you know, because I think nature naturally goes against progress. Anyone that's very much, very
Harmony, right?
attached to nature, right?
Right.
They're going to have hesitation towards technology or things that go
Sure.
against nature in some kind of way. So yeah, I guess that would be true. I
What
guess, yeah.
what do you think of that premise, Austin? Does that go anywhere?
Yeah, the idea came to mind that there's these stages of development, and to me it seems like these kind of transcendental ideas of like other worlds could represent like a growth and the ability to think abstractly, and that could lead one to technological types of thinking and developments. But I think you're right. Purely nature thinking seems very, I don't want to say infantile, but young, seems underdeveloped. And there's a natural trajectory. And people talk about this when you're studying the history of a
Huh.
religion. They start with animism, and then they go through nature cults that are focused on the mother. And then the father tends to be a further development, followed by non dualism. So there is a definite trajectory. And I think there is like it represents a more kind of general kind of mental development. So that would make a lot of sense because I was sitting here thinking about it too. I can't think of any advanced societies that still were animist and shamanistic. Like you have to go to very isolated tribes that are definitely not technologically advanced.
You guys brought
Man,
two really good points. Austin said that's young. That's like as far as a civilization, it's a younger thought pattern, which I agree. And then Dean said cautious. Anything that could hurt or harm nature, you would kind of move away from. You're thinking more of the lines of harmony instead of progression. So those are really great points. And then we romanticize it, don't we? Like, oh, that's how it should have been. That's how we should have developed. And I was like, yeah, but it never plays out that way, like ever. Like when has that approach ever worked? They always get taken over and wiped off the planet of the Earth. And, it feels right, but it just doesn't work in the long run.
mm. You
Yeah.
know, it's interesting, Austin. You talk about that idea of going from the mother to the father. One of the things that this book brought up was the word podder, which, is like padre, father, right? We always associate it with, dad or the family head. But this word, podder, it goes back to fucking Aryans, like people who were like thousands of years ago who conquered, India and whose people eventually settled Greece and all that sort of stuff. The term means authority. Yeah.
Sure.
And one of the interesting things that they saw is that all of these religions in the house where you were keeping the fire and stuff like that, they had to be led by primogenitor, the firstborn son, or the father had to lead it.
What
And
was
it
the
had
word? What did you say?
primogenitor, the
Is,
firstborn son,
that's what that means? I've never heard of it.
yeah, but this idea that like Padre, they call Zeus and stuff like that. Padre, they call him, but it doesn't mean like the father. And like in church, we say, "Oh, father," blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't mean dad. It means the authority. That's what it really means, the authority. And so you have all these things in Roman law where you were like, "Oh, these people are clearly sexist. The man is in charge of everything," but it didn't have to do with the superiority biologically of man. It had to do with the religion. It had to do with the only one that could honor the ancestors was the firstborn legacy, the firstborn son, And so there's this complete abandonment of the mother. Mother doesn't exist there. There is only the padre, and padre becomes associated with authority. It's not even a sex term, it's an authority term, you know? And it's just fascinating to look at that shit, man. Sorry, guys, we get a little scholarly
That'd be a
tip.
good name for a rapper, The Authority. Like, oh my God, this guy's like, he's the best,
Authority.
obviously. Yeah.
I like that stuff. We used to call our grandfather Padre. I think he liked that.
He preferred to be called that. And I think because he thought of himself as the authority figure, at least every time I talked to him, it was advice laden conversation, regardless of what I had to say. Yeah.
Those were some painful conversations, man.
Painful.
Painful.
Hours of nonstop just blabber coming out of that man's mouth. It was astounding.
Austin,
Astounding.
again, this kind of gets to what I was telling Austin earlier about a hippie who trapped me in Hawaii. Austin, my grandfather used to like call me into his room and I'd be sitting there and he'd just like start reading poetry that he wrote, shitty poetry that he wrote for like hours. And I was too nice. I couldn't. He would bring in all the grandchildren and they would leave and I would stay because I couldn't say, like, I got to go, Grandpa. Sorry,
Have you
just a
got
jerk.
brings up an interesting topic that has happened to me this week. I've been very proud of myself for this, is putting my foot down in conversations where people are starting to ramble. It's been fantastic.
I
It's
feel like you've
just
done that your whole life, man.
no, I
What?
think because in therapy I'm not allowed to do that. I have to be
Oh,
very
yeah, fair.
cautious. And so that carries over to my real life. But I was in Chiang Mai waiting for my grab, and this chick, Indonesian liberal chick, oh, American politics, Trump, blah, blah. And I was just, stop, stop. She goes, I was like, just stop. I don't agree with you. And she did. And that was the end of the conversation. I was like, man, I need to do that more. Stop.
Yeah.
We disagree. Let's no longer communicate. And it was fantastic. It worked. It worked exactly how you think it would. She stopped talking.
I'm not surprised. This is something that Chase has brought up before. He hates a rambler, and I get it.
You know what I hate most about a rambler is their complete inawareness of me. Like, look, I'm looking at my wrist. I don't even have a watch, But that's the universal term for man, I gotta go. I can't take this anymore. They're blissfully unaware that the other person is disinterested and not giving a shit, but they just keep going. That's what bothers me. It's just
I will say,
how can you not know? How?
as a strategy, I think that might be the best possible strategy for a conversation. Instead of engaging in any way, just saying
Stop.
stop, stop. That's it. That's a one word quick. There might be a tiny bit of a little bit of shock, but a little bit of shock is better than any other outcome that conversation could go down.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? Like, actually, I think I disagree with you on this point and this point, and just stopping it in its tracks and moving on to another conversation. Good strategy, man. That's
Thank you.
some therapy right there.
No, I totally agree. I think it's really weird that our culture doesn't have a kind of stopping mechanism. Like we can't just. It's rude to say, "I'm getting tired of this conversation. I think I'm going to go for a walk." It's like you can never say that. That's so strange, and especially at work, because of you have to kind of catch really quick conversations, and like you're busy, but they're not, and it's very awkward to pull yourself away. And we need to figure out how to do it properly because I always feel bad, the way
Well,
sometimes you have to jerk away very quickly.
well, you bring up a good point as context. I have no, I'll never see that woman again. There is no established relation. These strangers to me, that's free range. That's easy. But at work, where it's like an authority figure or a colleague that may say something wrong, then it's just like you feel obligated to tolerate them and like, all right, let me be nice. It's a different situation. You're absolutely right.
It
Yeah.
it's interesting. In China, there's two things that come to mind. So in China, there's a word called "haola," which means finished, right? And they use it all the time. And it is the signal that the conversation is over. And it happens in little conversations. It happens in big conversations. But you could be at the store going la 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 la, haola, done. It's like just announcing done. You know, which is a cool thing. And the other thing, this is a little off topic, but it still kind of works. Wu Yan, this is one of the first things he ever taught me in China. He's like, Chinese people, you're allowed one question for each conversation. Never anymore. One. Just one. You can ask another one tomorrow, but one. That's it. That's all you get. And I was like, oh, okay. Because Chinese people, I'm an interviewer, man. I'll be like, oh, tell me about that. Where are you from? What's this one? Like, and they would look at me like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you still talking? You know what I mean? And that was a valuable lesson. One question, then you move on. Good rules of society we should maybe adopt in America.
Okay, so what I hear is we need a word to end conversations, and then if you are engaging with a rambler, you like, all right, I'll give you three questions, and I'll hold it up on my hand. I'll remind you every time you ask one. So we're getting down less and less. These are great social skills.
You
Fantastic.
have to be a traffic officer with conversation, right? Stop. You get three. One, two, three. All right, stop, stop, stop.
That-
Go, man.
yeah, then we have our word to distinguish or extinguish the conversation.
But you know what? I think in the modern world, people are naturally submissive. And I think they would be grateful for you taking the authority, you taking control, saying, I'm leading this conversation, I'm dictating where we're going. And they'll say, thank you for taking control.
This is a fucking unbelievably important point. Right now, the premise or the vibration of society is submissive. People will back off because they're terrified. They don't want to offend you. I think I'm taking advantage of that. Stop. I'm not interested in this conversation. I don't like you because they always yield. Nobody's confrontational anymore, at least in America. Everybody
Grateful.
avoids conflict. Yeah, there's no men left. Nobody's
Yeah.
going to go into conflict there. So if they're like that, take advantage of it. Take the step forward and say, fuck off. And they will.
See, all this advice, Chase, you need to be like systematically listing it out so that you can one day put it in a book. Huh? The Art of Conversation by Dr. Chase Conrad.
I
Yeah.
think there'd be a lot of lawsuits with that. This is where it can go wrong. I think I should provide the counter where the reversal, where this can actually
How about
fuck you
you
over
just
too.
call the book Authority, The Art of Conversation with Chase Conrad,
You
Dr.
the
Chase Conrad.
authority. That's right. So
Yeah.
I feel obligated to ask because we have been getting better at making shorts. We need to touch on anything that's going on in the world that's captivated your interest this week that other people might be discussing around the water cooler. Anything come to mind, guys?
Austin, you got anything, man?
Ian, please don't put this on me, please.
It's all, see, here's the thing, man. Like, Chase, I don't, have you been getting the Vic calls? Because I can't handle them. I stop him now because our dad, he calls me basically every day now just to say, hey, you up? Yeah. Trump, blah, 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 blah. He
Oh,
can't stop. He can't stop. And I literally, like the last time I said, I was like, he picked up the phone. I pick up the phone and I said, if you have something to say about Trump, just stop. Just stop.
yep.
I can't. I can't handle it, man. And I wish I had news topics, but I'm so fucking sick of it because every day is DEF CON 1. You know, like I can't, man. I can't process this shit.
This
It's too much.
this is fascinating because he calls me too, and he avoids that topic because he knows we're on opposite ends. But if he accidentally brings it up, I'm like, oh, you know who Trump reminds me of? Christ. He's like a Christ-like figure, single-handedly rising up to save our country. And he's like, I gotta go. I can't handle it. He goes, I can't believe you think. And then that's it. That ends the conversation. I just dive completely to the opposite direction on the extreme end. So, um,
How can people take the mental toll, man? Like I told Vic that I was like, dude, how can you watch this every day when you see the paranoia that it's conjuring up
well,
inside of you?
let
I
me
don't
just
understand.
yeah, everything I hear about Trump now, he's like, hey, he signed a law where only women can compete against women in sports. No more transgender shit. I'm like, this is just the most basic, simple, practical thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, this is a good thing. Everything I pretty much hear coming out of that is like, oh, this is what like a sane, average IQ person would do. Yeah, this makes sense. Makes sense. I don't know. Maybe you guys have heard different, but everything I'm hearing, I'm like, I get a slow head nod. I'm like, yeah, good fucking job. Nice to know something's actually getting done.
What
Yeah.
about the presence of all these billionaires, these tech people, these reptilians, if you will? It's not a good sign. I mean, I totally get it. I think Trump, has done a few things I thought was interesting. Putting Tulsi Gabbard as head of the Intelligence Committee, I believe, was like a really cool idea. I'm really for that.
Why?
But what she has a great record of telling the truth about the darker side of the intelligence agencies, and she's anti-war. She's gone out of her way to talk to Assad, which they demonize her for doing that, and she's gone out of her way to say like, hey, we could make peace with Russia, and of course they demonized her for saying that as well, because presumably, and I don't want to speculate about motives, but based on their actions, all they want an endless war with Russia and in Syria too. We have military in Syria. So it seems like Trump is putting people into place that are anti-war, and I'm all for that.
Well, let me tell
Oh,
you something, man. I want to point this out because one thing Trump has done consistently is he has appointed beautiful people. And I think Tulsi's kind of hot, man.
look,
Yeah. I
Tulsi's
kind of
from
like that gray streak going through the hair. There's
yeah,
something sexy about her, man.
she's from Hawaii. She's actually like,
What?
and I would say out of the Hawaiians that I've met, the women are the brains because they have to be. They're raising like 10 kids. They got to be fucking
Yeah.
sound. She's smart. She's from Hawaii, so she's kind of cool. But that streak in her hair, I'm like, is that natural? That has
It's a
to be
little
natural.
Cruella de Vil sort of thing,
Yeah,
man,
that's
you know.
kind of sexy. Like it gives her this little flair. Like if I ran into her on the islands, I'd totally ask her out. Just because of that hair piece. It's fantastic. I love that. I wish I had
What?
like a streak or something like that. That would be so cool.
Can I just say that there's something about like I think that Austin maybe it'd be interesting to get a gay man's perspective on this. I feel like Republican women are hotter, you know. Like I think of the Fox News girl, you know what I mean? Whoever was in charge of Fox News, he was I remember in the early 2000s cuz mom always had Fox News on at all times. They always had the same thing. They would always have banging hot women. They had the show called Fox and Friends. They've kept the same two guys for 25 years, but they always change out the broad every 5 years. A new blonde, former Miss America come in there, and they always have the leg shot. Always. Like they'll have the high table, the short skirts, and there she is reading the news with the legs out. And I was like, this is a constructed piece of propaganda. And even as a gay man, I love it. I thought it was awesome. I was like, they just embracing the identity, man,
It's
going with the
it's it's worked from the beginning of time and it's never failed. Why would you ever deviate? The only example, I'm on
I mean, there's
Korean.
Rachel Maddow, Chase. Do you find her attractive?
Korean, this is the problem with the Democrats. I'm on Korean Airlines. Korean Airlines, every fucking
Airline.
flight attendant is stunning. They all look the same.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. They're well spoken. They speak like five languages. They're unbelievably polite. I'm like, this is the type of fucking flight attendant you have. Then I get on Delta. You have a transgender. You got a 300-pound obese fat fuck that just hates his job. And I'm just like, I get nauseous. I'm like, I don't want to communicate with these people. I don't want these people saying hello to me. Like this is who you choose to interact in the aisle. It's just it leads nowhere. It's
Yeah.
stupid. It's fucking stupid. And they've just went insane with the liberal shit. It's just gone absolutely insane. Hey, I want to go back because Austin, you said what the fuck did you say? It's billionaire reptilians? Please explain more.
Nah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's well known that the billionaire class are all reptilians or possibly robots. I haven't decided quite yet.
No,
But who the
how much is I mean, is this a consideration in your mind? This could possibly be true. This is
I think it's a fascinating idea because if you look online, you'll find pictures of these people that get caught in these really quick snapshots, and their eyes are slid down the middle and green. It could be an artifact of a photograph. Would that's exactly what they want you to believe is my feeling. But
Well,
I don't know how to take over, Dave, please.
no, no, no. What I was gonna say is, you're right to be scared of fucking Elon. Like, I'm scared of Elon, man. Like, first of all, there is something just a little not human about him. Not necessarily reptilian, but spectrum for sure, right? And let's not forget America has a history of super rich guys controlling everything. Don't forget about the Rockefellers, man. They were pulling all the fucking strings in America to the point where the presidency was a joke and all that there was the power of the Rockefellers, And now we live in the age of tech. And these guys, like, all you got to do is look at the inauguration and you see that the entire back panel, oh, it's the head of Google, Facebook, Elon, and everybody else. Like, there's Tim Cook from the Apple and all that shit. The fact is that we are seeing the evil side of capitalism, man. And the fact is that these people are wielding more power today than they have in our entire lifetime. Elon is literally hacking into government offices. He's barring people from entering other government offices from an entirely new position that was made up for him. That This is crazy. This is kind of crazy, man. Like, I'm not going to tell whether it's good or bad, but it's unprecedented, you know? And surely that's something that should make people at least raise an eyebrow.
uh yes. I'm glad it's happening. I am. I like Elon. I do think he's probably some type of alien, probably. It's just a bizarre name. He looks weird. He's just there's
Didn't he
something
name
that
his son like 34574 or something
there's
like that?
there's not a lot of human qualities to this guy. But I'm glad like some of the shit that's coming out with these budget fines, like here's a transgender opera in Colombia that they're giving 100,000. I'm like, what? You know, and then you're getting into bigger ones now for millions of dollars. And oh, they gave this political agency $8 million to say all this. I'm like, this shit needs to come out. And only in America it would come out in a fucked up way. Some billionaire's doing it. He's probably controlling the narrative to some degree, but at least some of it's coming out. Never would I feel like there's a proper way to dislodge all this information. If it's Elon, that's fine. It's okay. It's probably some
But
fucked up shit he's hiding, but at least something's happening. At least
what's the
something's happening.
goal? What's the goal? What does Elon want? Because I don't believe the goal is, I want what's best for America. No fucking way, man. Like, I believe that there is something self-interested motivating him.
I do think that you make America hum better. It does benefit him. So I do think that there is a need to alleviate a lot of this debt to make America thrive a bit because everybody's struggling. But that is to enhance his own company and his own advantages, sure. But I don't think it's all just me, me, me. I think it does entail the greater whole. I don't know if that's for the better or worse, but we'll see.
Go
I'm
ahead,
okay
Austin.
with all of it. I'm cool with it.
Thank you for respecting the hand. Dean, have you heard of the 1933 business plot?
No, what's this?
I'm going to have to read from Wikipedia because that's what I have in front of me. But, quote, the business plot, also called the Wall Street Push and the White House Push, was a political conspiracy in 1933 in the United States to overthrow the government of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and install Smedley Butler as dictator. Butler, a retired Marine Corps Major General, testified under oath that wealthy businessmen were plotting to create a fascist veterans organization with him as its leader and use it in a coup d'etat to overthrow Roosevelt. In 1934, Butler testified under oath before the United States House of Representatives Special Committee on Un-American Activities, the quote McCormick-Dickstein Committee unquote, on these revelations. Although no one was prosecuted, the Congressional Committee final report said, quote, there is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient, unquote. And maybe there's another unquote in there too. But it's a very famous thing. I've seen a documentary about it a little while ago.
Wow, no, I'm not familiar with that, but that lines up with precisely the sort of thing that has been happening in America for from the beginning, right? And you can go back to the founders of Hamilton and the New York banks. Yeah, it was the same thing. Financial interests were always driving the political intentions of the United States of America to the point where there could be something like a coup, right? It may not be quite as direct as that, but there's definitely been moments where suddenly the funding has been cut off against your primary component, you know? Suddenly everybody imagine what happened to Bernie in 2020, right? He's the presumptive nominee. And then suddenly everybody on the Democratic side unites together against him, you know? When there's a direct threat to corporate interests, to financial interests, you better believe that they're going to flex their muscle in America. That's always how it's been. And not just in America, by the way. The industrial side of every society always flexes its muscle. That's how Hitler came into power. He had the industrialists backing him, and they hated the communists. And Hitler promised to get rid of the communists, you know.
For me, this is very exciting. This is the first time in my life politically where I'm like, oh, there's going to be a change. It's not just a fucking word. We're not going to make America great again. It's just like, it's not this bullshit. It's like, you're fucking shit up. You're throwing shit out there, and the means you're going about doing it is questionable, sure, but things are not going to be this. He's talking a big game, and so
Mm.
far he's making moves, and it's just I'm watching. I'm like a little excited. I'm like, wow, something's happening. It could destroy us. It could make us better. I'm okay for either because stagnant my whole life where nothing has ever changed has gotten old. I'm okay with deviation from the norm right now. I'm okay with it.
Speaking of like, like what is German character? I think American characters change.
And
Like
progress.
Americans deeply desire like they are one of the few people in the world who love to just they embrace the chaos. They want the chaos. They want the party. They want to be loud and crazy and do things. And I think that that's part of the value of America. And so yeah, I get that appeal, man. I do.
The
It doesn't mean it's not scary.
no,
It's always a little scary,
it's very confusing for other people. Like here in Thailand, I'm talking to my buddy Boat last night, and he was like, "As you
See?
Americans are so fucking confusing." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "For 8, 10 years, it's this woke shit, woke, woke, woke. Then overnight, it's dead. All right, fuck it, it's gone, it's gone. No more
Got
DEI."
that out of our system.
He's like, "I've never seen just shifts in morality so quickly." I'm like, "Man, that's fucking America, man.
But
That's
that
it."
is America, man. That's just like fucking slavery, right? Like slavery had to be purged from the American system. And then they're like, but we still have Jim Crow. Okay, we want this. Now we got to get rid of Jim Crow. Now civil rights movement. Now we're going to have hippies. Now we're going to get rid of the hippies going to the Reagan era. Like that pendulum swing of morality that's American, man.
American, man.
That's how we function. We're like a bipolar patient, just one extreme to it, or maybe a manic depressive. You
That is
know,
bipolar. That's 101 bipolar. Yes.
there you go, man. But that's what makes America great. You can have Trump and you can have Obama. You go back and forth between that shit. It looks like insanity, but somehow we keep moving forward.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a quote that Richard Ramirez actually quotes it in an interview. It's actually a Nietzsche quote, but he says, "An individual's insanity is a rarity, and in societies or groups of people, it's the rule." And I think
Mm.
American politics bears that out quite a bit. But people always say that like the person can be reasoned with, but the collective cannot. And I think this kind of pendulum like swing is indicative of non-rational thinking. It's like reaction, overreaction, like over and over again.
Well, that's an interesting question, Austin. So, since you've studied all this shit, have you ever seen a, I'm going to use the broad word, a philosophical, how about this? How about a wise collective? You know, is it possible for wisdom to penetrate a collective rather beyond the individual to have a city of enlightened people or a city of philosophy people or like Plato's Republic, that sort of idea,
I'm trying to think really hard. I'm pretty sure once you get beyond like 100 people, the insanity starts to creep in, and the paranoia and the us versus them thinking. I mean, you have to be really careful. You have to be around a lot of very intelligent, but like emotionally stable. And actually, I think in a lot of cases, being intelligent can work against people because they can better make up theories in which they're persecuted in various different ways. It's hard to say, man. I can't think of it. I can't think of it. But you can point over and over to cases of mass insanity. And would you consider Nazism as mass insanity, or do you think it was a kind of appropriate response? Like, how do you think of it, Dean, as a student of history? What, or were they all insane?
so that's a fascinating example of collective action because there's this idea that what because they've done so much research on like post-war Germany, and what they found is the Nazis, true ideologues of the Nazis, that was probably only about 28% of the population, meaning people who registered pre his Hitler chancellorship. But after Hitler came in charge, suddenly everybody joins because we're talking about getting jobs, we're talking about securing your family, we're talking about your reputation amongst the German people. And then what happens is this kind of passive tolerance where everyone says, this is just how it is now. You know, there's a great book called A Few Good Men, I think, A Few Good Men. And it's about these German guys who were like, they were older men who were like grocers and butchers and post office workers, right? And they were too old to go to the front lines. So they were sent to be prison guards at Auschwitz and Dachau. And these were good guys. They went to church, they had families, wives, daughters, sons, all that stuff. But while they were in the prison camp, they were torturing people. They were literally slaughtering thousands and thousands of Jews. And then once the war is over, they go right back to their normal life. They go back to being a butcher and they're kissing their daughter and going to church every Sunday. You know, what the
Yeah.
fuck happened? You know, and I think that it's not just about I think sometimes the collective is so powerful that it numbs the brain's morality. Like the individual becomes, you somehow become nothing in the greater collective. And I think we see that in like Soviet society and stuff like that, where it just overwhelms any independent thought. That's my only theory with it.
That's a
Yeah.
great example. I think, like what Socrates said, they one philosophical king to run. But I mean, that's a lifetime. So you might have like a transcendental mind that transforms society for a while, and then you'll get a fucked up one. I think of the city states like Sparta. I would say that was pretty close to a group cohesive mindset. At least everybody adopted it, but that's small scale. And then you
Rampant pedophilia. Go
Right,
on.
right. Sure, but that's about as big as it gets, right? Maybe a city where you know every single aspect of your town where everybody thinks the same. That's about as the mass that I've seen. I've never see it. I don't think a country could. It'd have to be small scale like that.
Dean, that example you gave me was quite chilling. I feel like we all sit on the precipice of insanity, given the correct conditions. And people talk about the banality of evil. Is that man? When I talk to people, they deny they could ever commit atrocities. I say,
Who? These
given the
people are
correct
crazy.
conditions, they
Yeah.
they absolutely are. And this is why I like the idea of the shadow so much, because Jung went out of his way to say the people that are most dangerous are the people that repress their violent tendencies. And I think maybe perhaps these people were an example of that. When they were in the conditions in a civil society, they acted civilly. When they were in an uncivil society, they acted uncivilly. But ultimately, they were overrun by the collective mindset, whichever way it was going at the time. And this is the kind of thesis of that book I recommended a while ago, which I've been thinking about, by Carl Jung, The Undiscovered Self. And the
Mm,
primary question was, how does the individual resist uh, the uh, the overflowing energy of the collective? And ultimately, his perspective was that it was spiritual experience that
mm.
somehow connected us to the divine, and he didn't see a way out of it besides that. This kind of deep inner knowing or gnosis of God. I think it's very fascinating, but uh, it was just something I've been thinking about. But I totally agree with Jung there. Everybody has a shadow side. Everybody is dangerous under the correct conditions. And it's the like a life's work to like truly grapple. And I've been very sympathetic to the idea of the fall, that we're all fallen, and that we all have these evil tendencies in us, and it's just like we're just waiting for the key. And ideally you come to terms with that before the conditions arise, so you are that guy that goes against the tyranny, or the communist, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, but that's purely individual, right? There's no such thing as like a collective spiritual experience, right, Austin?
Right. It all arises from these deep personal religious or spiritual experiences that somehow shape that make the individual a true individual, and not merely a kind of artifact or tool of the collective, which we are outside of these transformational experiences. So, which I completely,
Self-actualized.
yeah, I think there's a lot of different terms you can use. Yeah, but definitely self-actualized, or individualized is a term that, well, individualization is a term that Jung uses. That,
Individuation.
yeah, okay. Where you're not really a true individual. You may consider yourself, and you may flatter yourself that you're a true individual, but really you have no say in the matter. You're just going to go whatever direction the tide goes in. And you're going to say that, okay, I made this choice, when it really wasn't the case. But true individuality is something that is attained through deep introspection, and a lot of really difficult work. And it's not something that you're born with.
You,
Man, I have to. Chase, you want to share? You can.
I was going to say also, the Milgram experiments, right? The psychologist with the shock and all that shit.
Oh yeah, that they would just continue to go because of the authority.
The authority figure there made the percentages drastically increase. Like, hey, this guy seems like he's in pain. The experiment requires you to keep on. Please continue. And they would. So if there is that presence there, like, no, this is fine. This is what you're supposed to do. I mean, it shot up 20-30%. Without it, I think less than half went through all the way. So you could see morality come out. But if there's that overwhelming sense of this is what you're supposed to do, you have to do it, vast majority follow through. So that echo chamber in the background matters for sure.
Man, I have to share this little story because it fits in with this about how easily people can be, their morals just dissolve into nothing. Yeah. I've been reading this great book, and there was this chapter about Joseph Goebbels, who's the minister of propaganda in Nazi Germany, right? And it talks about how he got started. The guy is super well educated. Like, imagine some dude goes to like a respectable university, like he goes to University of North Carolina, right? But he studies like art history and like rhetoric and all this shit you can't get a job with. And so he gets out of college, can't find a job. He tries writing plays, nobody wants to publish his plays. He tries writing articles, no newspaper wants to do his articles. He's a loser. You know what I mean? And this whole time, he's keeping a journal. And in this journal, he's just constantly falling in love with women. You know, a sort of guy who, like, he goes out on one date with a girl and he's like, this is my wife. I'm going to marry her. And he's just right. I love this girl, blah, blah. And then next week, oh, now I'm in love with Elsa. Elsa is my true love, blah, blah, blah. And then, oh, Elsa fucked me over. I want to kill myself. Like just crazy falling in love every few moments. You know what I mean? And it's a new girl every week. Well, anyways, he runs into this guy named Strasser, who's Hitler's rival. He's basically Nazism, but with a communist lean. He actually believes that the proletariat are going to rise up and lead the movement, and him and Hitler are butting heads. Goebbels works with Strasser, right? And there's this critical moment where the German government is going to redistribute all of the wealth of the former Kaiser family, right? And there's this plebiscite that's going to happen. Are we going to give all of this former wealth to the proletariat, to the regular working man, or are we going to keep it in trust with the German state? Hitler is close with a lot of former royals and a lot of industrialists who say we do not want to give any power to the communists at all, and we want to keep the royal legacy alive. Status quo conservative thinking that. Well, Strasser and Goebbels, they say give it to the poor. Absolutely, we should have the proletariat support us. So we're going to tell all the Nazis in Berlin vote for redistributing the wealth. Yeah. Hitler and Strasser meet in this big meeting, and Strasser and Goebbels are fighting against Hitler. And he writes in his journal, "This Hitler guy's full of shit. I don't think he's great at all. Hitler sees there's something special about this guy. He likes how vitriolic he is. He likes how passionate he is when he speaks. So Hitler sends him a letter. Says, "Hey, come down to Munich." And when he comes down to Munich, he greets him like with a special car. There's a big crowd. And he's like, "I'm going to speak at a rally tonight. There's going to be 100,000 people there. I want you to introduce me. You're going to go on for," he speaks for 2.5 hours. The next day in his journal, he's going, "Hitler is the greatest man of all time. I don't know what I was thinking. Strasser's full of shit. Hitler was clearly right the entire time." Hitler saw something in him. He gave him a little praise, and he abandons all of his ideals. He says, fuck the plebiscite, fuck the communist thinking. Hitler is the way to go. Just like that. Just like he was with those fucking women. Like one day he's in love with this one, moves on to the next one, falls in love. The morality meant nothing. The thinking meant nothing. He was able to change on its own just because somebody gave him a little respect. Somebody gave him a little bit of power. And he said, yes, more, more, more. And it was over. It was over. The ideals meant nothing. And I was thinking to myself, I think I'd be the same way. Like if I had like Trump call me up and say, "I want you to write a speech for me, Dean. I want you to write a speech for me, and I want you to write a speech about how gay people are the devil. And I'm going to give you so much money for this." I think I would be like, this is my chance. This
Yeah.
is what I've waited for my whole life. This is the moment. Ah! I really do think I would be exactly the same fucking way. I hate to admit it, but dude, that's how weak people's morals are.
Why do
Well,
you say you hate to admit it though? Like
Because I want to be like what Austin said, man. I want to be a true individual. I want to be the guy who stands up for what's moral. I want to be in control of myself. I don't want to believe that the collective is determining my decisions. I want to be master of my domain. I think we all do, right? Go ahead, Austin.
yeah. I've been listening to a lot of this nature podcast, so it's going to come up pretty often.
It's a
But
German episode, everybody. I like this. Go ahead.
yeah. But fundamentally, Nietzsche had this idea called the will to power, right? And morality was the will to power sublimated, if you will, for the weak. So morality is will to power for weak people so they can feel superior. And that's it. I think this is what you're kind of, I immediately thought of this. Like he was moral in the correct situations because that was expedient to get the most power. But when true power, came up, he immediately jumped on it. And I think that was, I don't know, a very good example of that.
well, I think
Is
to,
your assumption there that morality then is completely retarded and stupid? Like, would Nietzsche say that morality is for the weak and therefore it has no real use to a powerful person?
No, he doesn't really say that it's proper to be cruel or anything of that sort. Just that kind of the holding up of those kind of values does arise through weakness, and there is a morality of strength that he talks about that I'm not really in a position to go over. But it does not come from an attempt to get over on people. It's because of like an internal value that we've been talking about. It doesn't come up from manipulating others. It's an authentic ethics that is not based on manipulating people or or trying to get over on people using these kind of mental gymnastics that is slave morality. It's something different, but it's also the same with Heidegger. He has this notion of authenticity, and it's also often criticized and in a similar way to the Nietzschean idea of the will to power, because it's ambiguous. You could be authentically good or perhaps authentically bad. And the same with the Nietzschean idea of the will to power or this kind of authentic morality. It could go either way. It's not necessarily bad from my understanding.
Interesting. Wow.
Well, I think this guy you talk about, the relationships, he's 100% in, and then he's 100% out. So it really the core theme here is self-esteem, and that's probably what Hitler hit on. It's just like, I'll fulfill all those urges that you have. That's the urge that kept him alive, that got him up every day, and he did, and therefore that defined his morality. So that is weak man morality because it's fueled by something else. It's not authentic. I think that's a great point, man. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting because it proves the genius of Hitler too, because he
Brilliant.
saw in this guy. Like he saw how passionately he was arguing. Joseph Goebbels is the head of Nazi propaganda. He becomes one of the most powerful people in the entire Third Reich. Hitler recognized the loser had talent and he
Sure.
knew exactly how to manipulate them. And Jesus Christ, that's a rare person to look at the unemployed college graduate and go like, that's my future right hand man right there.
Let me ask you this, because you prefaced it earlier. I shouldn't think this way. And I remember right when I started my PhD, that's when Jordan Peterson was first coming out. And I remember he was giving this lecture. It was back one of his lectures in class, and he's talking about the Nazis, and he's like, "And I know you think you would never fall in line with the propaganda, but the majority did." And I remember him saying that in his I'm like, I 100% would fall in line. There is no doubt in my, I would never question that. I was shocked that the majority of the world would say I would never do that. It's like, of course I would. If you threaten me with my life, if I can't advance in my career, like I would fall in line. I totally would. It's just what happens. It's a subtle shift over time, but and then it's like, man, the majority of people truly believe that they are better. I would never do something like that. I'm like, well, I don't know how people come to that conclusion. And I think this is where this woke shit came from. Because it's the morality is so displaced by weaker emotions, lack of self-esteem. Oh, I feel like a horrible person, therefore I got to build up everybody else around me. There's no self-work done. Nobody works on themselves anymore. They say the right thing, even so much so, like you said earlier, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't think this way. I was like, why the fuck do people say that? It pisses me off, man. I hate that you have to preface an idea with something like that before you dive into the topic. But that's just where we're at as a society.
I like that. I like that.
I wish I could say something. I was sitting here going through Goebbels quotes, trying to.
Oh, Goebbels is interesting, man. He's a fascinating individual. Yeah. He, you know, one of the things that really draws me into history is I see so much of myself in any history that I read. Like I really do. I really did feel like Goebbels. Then I was like, fuck. I think I would say yes. I think I would take the power. But Austin, I tell you, man, I like. Do you consider yourself a moral person? Austin. I mean, I'm not asking you to say, are you a, yes, I'm a sinner and a deviant and all that, but you consider yourself to be dedicated to be, always striving for the moral outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try very, very hard, but I
Why?
have some.
Yeah, why?
Oh, that's a great question. I've actually read a lot of books trying to figure out the ground of morality, and it seems to be from Jean-Paul Sartre that values are arise from a formless ground that you can't say why, and that it's like
Mhm.
a really
Like the
crazy.
Tao. The Tao, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, Sartre is pretty straightforward in his terminology. He just talks about like it being a nothingness, and like consciousness is a nothingness. This is a kind of byword that Sartre uses, and values are only connected to consciousnesses, and they don't exist in the real world. They're applied. They arise in the world because individual minds or consciousnesses have projects. So, and these project, and then things are seen in the world as being a help or a hindrance in relation to projects. And this is how morality arises. But that's a great question. Where does morality come from? And from the existentialists I read is that there is actually no foundation. That there's this kind of arbitrariness to it, where you can never actually track down. It's like it goes into a darkness. Like you say it goes from here to here to here, but eventually it fades away into the darkness of consciousness from which values arise, and you don't really know anymore. Like, why am I good? Why do I hold certain values as good? I I genuinely don't know. But I
But you
will
still
say this:
strive to be moral?
yes, uh, not because I think not because I have a rational explanation of why this is the correct way to go, but it's a feeling. And it's
Hmm.
not something that is eminently defensible, which is kind of puts me in a very awkward situation, right? But it is something that my life revolves around because I genuinely try to be a good person. And I suffer greatly when I fall short of those ideals. Like, I have a very strong conscience. And if I do something wrong, it haunts me mercilessly, like for a long time.
I
So this is really interesting because hold on, Chase, because I'm going to say something regarding you. I really believe you described how Chase functions, because I consider Chase to be a feeling person. What I mean by that is intuition guides him more than any logic. Chase, would you agree with me?
keep going.
What I'm saying is that, it is interesting. We do have a tendency to always justify our thinking, right? Like there has to be logic and reason supporting whatever we happen to be getting into, whatever our beliefs are, whatever our morals are. But at the end of the day, it's that line from the Tao, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, right? Eventually, it does all become abstract. And eventually, when you go deep enough, it's just a feeling, you know? And I really do believe that, as we don't want to admit to that, but I think that the moment you accept that, yeah, it's just how I feel, or yeah, it's just the intuition that I have, the more I believe spiritual progress can happen. The more I believe that self actualization can happen. The more I believe that morality can happen. When you get to that point of almost surrendering the logic in favor of the essential intuition that remains. Does that make sense, Chase?
I don't know if I'd call myself an intuitive person. I definitely try to tap into it, and at times I very much struggle. But I would say with Austin, I think this is the vast majority of the world, especially people I talk to, is this battle with morality. Like it's always there, and there's this need to be a better person. You're not sure where they arise from or what you're like it, but it's always like gnawing and eating at you. And I can fall into that, but rarely do I, because I think you hit on this, Dean. I talk to so many people. I've heard so many stories, and not once, and thousands of convos who I've been like, man, I don't get how they got there. Every fucking time I'm like, I would have been a drug addict on the street too. I would have been a fat fuck. I would have quit. Like, I always can understand how they've come to a conclusion because I'm just listening. Like I get it. And to me, it's just like it's made me amoral. It's just like morality can sway so easily based on experiences and what you didn't get or what you did get. Simple as that, man. I could see it fluctuating all the time. So it's like, hey, Chase, if you were rich, would you be a different person? Fuck yes, I was. Absolutely. If I was born in Nazi Germany, would I be a different person? Absolutely. Yes. It's like the wind, man. It can fluctuate so easily. I've always been aware of that, I think, because of the conversations, but I see it in the world. Everybody's obsessed with it, and they're not sure why.
If I can jump in real fast here, because I was talking about Sartre, whenever possible, I do like to go back to the original text. It could be read relatively quickly, but he's talking about here ethical anguish, and he says, "quote It
Mm.
can be revealed only to an act of freedom, which makes it exist as value by the sole fact of recognizing it as such. It follows that my freedom is the unique foundation of values and that nothing, absolutely nothing, justifies me in adopting this or that particular value. this or that particular scale of values. As a being by whom values exist, I am unjustifiable. My freedom is anguished at being the foundation of values while itself without foundation. It is anguished in addition because values, due to the fact that they are essentially revealed to a freedom, cannot disclose themselves without being at the same time put into question. For the possibility of overturning the scale of values appears complementarily as my possibility. It is anguish before values, which is the recognition of the ideality of values, unquote, if I said quote to begin with.
Austin, dude, that was way too deep. I
Dude.
didn't. I honestly couldn't follow
What
it.
he said something. What was the first thing he said about anguish?
Can
What
you
was the
can you analyze it? Can
what
you?
was what was the first word he said about anguish? Something anguish? That was his best point. And then he kept rambling. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, that nothing quote nothing, absolutely nothing justifies me in adopting this or that particular value or this or that particular scale of values. As a being by whom values exist, I am unjustifiable. Here it is. My freedom is anguished at being the foundation of values, while itself without foundation. Unquote. And with this whole without foundation thing is consciousness itself. Is what he's referring to there.
I thought, at least at first, before he dove too deep, it's almost like, I guess it's similar. It's just like he's had so many conversations that he sees that it could just shift. It's like that the anguish is always just kind of a part of it until you see that everybody has the anguish. It's like it's just shared. And then to just kind of accept it as, all right, this is just going to be there, and that this thing is kind of fluid and we're not sure why. I think it gives you more degrees of freedom and maybe more self-awareness as well to stop making it such a battle. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think the really clear point here is that values are not things that exist in the world like a tree,
Yeah.
and they only arise in relation to individual subjects. And subjects are free to change these values at any time. And that's again why he said we're anguished before our values, because ultimately we're the ones that create them, we're the ones that uphold them, and we're constantly aware that we could potentially tear them down.
I think
So
you
they're
nailed it.
not.
I think that's it, is that people get unbelievably terrified when their foundation or their values start to shift or they start to crumble, when we
Mhm.
should almost embrace it. Be like, oh, I'm growing, instead of, oh shit, everything that I've ever known is crumbling. I'm going to double down and fucking hear demons or see demons, right? Some shit like that.
Well, that's actually remarkable that you said that, because way, way later in the book, he comes to a very similar conclusion that we move from a state of anguish before our freedom and and this recognition that values are ultimately subjective and created and kind of hang in the air like ghosts. He says that goes from being a bad thing to being a really good thing, because we self-consciously take up freedom. And he talks about it in relation to play. Like we start to play with values. We recognize that our nature as creators, and it's like a very Nietzschean concept. This idea of the child at the end, like you're a camel, you're a dragon, and then
Mhm.
ultimately a child. But it's been a little bit since I've read that part. But you become the self-turning wheel, the creator of values, not an anguish before oneself as being in lack of a foundation, but recognizing and enjoying the freedom that entails.
So, have you reached a point with your own exploration of individual morality where you do have a firm grasp of that shadow? Yeah, for yourself. Do you feel like you at least understand what your individual morality is?
I do understand it, and every day is a process by which my ideals encounter reality, and I
Mhm.
have to really internalize very hard truths that everyone, and including myself, is complicated, and everybody has multiple drives, and some of which are not good. There's aggressiveness, there's selfishness, and all these things. But just like you and Chase, of course, like uh, I, ev- I am complicated, just like everybody's complicated. And this is
Mhm.
one of the things that I don't know. That's very hard to accept. That but it's very important to accept that everybody has really dark drives towards aggression and a bunch of things that you would probably prefer not to have within yourself.
Let me share a moment of sort of uh, a moral quandary for me, and I'm curious what you think, Austin. So I remember being a young teenager and suddenly discovering the world of jerking off, and I'm thinking of guys, and being a young Christian and stuff like that. I can remember just really, really struggling with this. Like, why the fuck is this happening? And I remember reading in the Bible that Paul had a thorn in his side that haunted him his entire life. It's like maybe God is testing me. Maybe this is just a test. And you're playing with these sexual ideas and you get involved in the dark world of the internet pornography and all that. And I found myself in this place where I was suddenly just surrounded by evil. I was thinking dark thoughts and I was imagining sinful activities and all that sort of stuff. And this was a struggle that went on and on and on until I was 20 years old and eventually lose my virginity in Amsterdam. And I remember that moment was so critically crystal clear for me, where the struggle was just over and the moral of it was put aside, where I was like, oh, this is just part of my life now and I don't have to worry about it anymore. And the struggle was over. It was just that experience that ended the moral quandary. You know what I mean? But in my mind as a young man, it was absolutely black and white. Like I am doing something wrong. I am sinning. Romans 1 is completely clear about this. And then an experience frees me of that. You know what I mean? And suddenly, you know, it's now part of my life and there's no moral qualms about it at all. You know what I mean? The reason I ask this is because it's a moment of moral shift for me at an individual level. And what I'm asking is that the fluidity that they're talking about where it changes for you? Or is it more of, oh, just your life experiences and that's the reaction you have to it? What I'm trying to ask is what is the healthy way for an individual to get to know their morality and then to get to a point where it is something that is almost a tool for you, something you can use for your benefit? I just use that example to demonstrate my own experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question. I don't even know if I can answer that. I'd say it's it's one of these moments when the ideal meets the real, and one has to overcome. And I think that's definitely a prescient moment in anyone's life because I've been around people. Many years ago, I was in a Christian chat room. This was probably 15 years ago, where this guy was talking about committing suicide in a Christian chat room because he was gay. And it's
Mm.
like I was so sad for this guy because there's nothing morally wrong with being gay in my estimation. It's not like you're not hurting anybody. And it was just so terrible. Like it, I don't know what to say about it, Dean. I don't know, but I do
I
think
guess what
that
I'm trying to say
morality.
is I just want to know how morality grows. How does should one cultivate morality? You know what I mean? Because what you described before, it's so complicated. It makes me think that see, like sometimes Chase, like what the way you talk, it makes me think, well, yeah, maybe I should just be like a fucking Nazi. You know what I mean? I just do exactly what's going to benefit me in this moment because that's what's best for me as an individual. What I want to find out is what is the healthy way to explore morality, where you get to better places with it.
I think the example you gave was that was almost like a catharsis. Like it was a struggle, and then it was gone, and that's awesome. I think they can actually use the term correctly in that sense. It usually doesn't happen for people like that. I think of an example. I had a very meek woman, soft spoken, pretty, but had been pushed around her entire life, right? And this is an issue. People take advantage of me. People say I need to stand up for myself, and it's just not who I am. And we have these conversations for months. And she tells me one that she runs this kind of, let's say it's a farm, work hands, and she kicks somebody off. And I'm like, what? You? And she told me the story. She did it very politely. You're breaking the rules, and therefore you can't be here anymore. And she's like, the guy bowed up. He asked to stay. And I was like, you need to be gone by the end of the day. It was very soft and it was very gentle, but it was firm. And I was like, that's your essence. was like, you don't have to scream, you don't have to bow up in someone's face, but they crossed the line and you pushed them back gently. And she was very content with that. She wasn't being someone that she wasn't. That was her truth. And I think when you find your truth, it's so personal, but it's unbelievably freeing. And the morality is just, it's not an issue anymore. It's like, this is the right direction for me, for me. And you're not implying it on anybody else, but you're not harming anybody else either. And that was beautiful. And it was a subtle shift for her. She started to get better, small little steps each day, but she got better. So I see
But
that a lot. The truth, your essence and your truth. Yes.
you're saying, but you need to have these experiences that sort of test your morality. That's when you kind of
You
discover what it really is, huh?
and this is Austin's point is the self-awareness, the self-actualization,
Hmm.
individuation. This comes with months of having someone pick at her each week, talk, because she's never talked about herself, never thought about herself. Most people don't do this. So it's a buildup. It's an awareness of self on a very deep and intimate level. Yes.
Interesting. That's a good story, man.
Yeah. I like her.
Yeah. Damn, I think we got very deep this week, guys. That was this guy. We were going from Nietzsche what was his name? Heidelbacher, you know, some kind of crazy German.
I just want to say one thing that look, I think there probably could be reptilians. You could be right. There's like I give that 10% chance that could be true. Some type of dominant species is fucking what is it, shape shifting and controlling us all and eating some of us. Maybe could be true. Makes sense.
Bringing it
Yeah, I
back to
looked
the
it up. It goes back to sci-fi novels from the 30s,
lizard
and it
people.
was yeah picked. I mean, but David Icke goes back to the African tribes who had notions of reptilian people. I don't know. I joke. I'm not really serious about it, but I think it's a fascinating as a modern mythology because a lot of people do believe it in the same way they believe the Earth is hollow and that the Earth is flat and that Hitler is still alive in Argentina. So I find modern myth making fascinating, and that's why I talk about it. But I would like to apologize. I'm very tired, and my autism is way up today, and so I've been all over the place. But I hope it
What? I thought
came
it was
out.
great today, man. You got nothing to apologize for.
Okay, good.
Oh,
Hey,
we
what
got
are
some
you
classic stuff.
apologizing for? Stop doing that. Fucking
Yeah.
liberal American. Always
Yeah.
apologizing for fucking everything. I don't know. What are you apologizing for, right?
Let me
Jesus.
clarify this statement by saying I really don't like Hitler that much. Let's go on.
Dude, that's
I was the one talking about Hitler. Don't worry
this is
about it.
look, this is my point earlier. You have to preface, like if you want to talk about Hitler, first say he was evil and a psychopath, and
Yeah.
you condemn everything he says, and then say whatever you want. It's fucked up. It's
That
fucked
was a
up.
callback, Chase. That was a callback to you, buddy.
All right, let's
Fuck.
go ahead and end it there, guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks for listening to the Divine Brothers. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.